For 30 years, Johnny Carson dominated late-night television. Night after night, The Tonight Show was not only America's bedtime ritual, it was also the birthplace of legends. Thousands of stars lined up, each hoping to get a smile, a laugh, or even just a nod of approval from the man behind the desk. But Johnny, he's not easy to convince. He can be warm and funny, but he's also notoriously hard to win over. And yet, few people succeed. Not the biggest names or the most scandalous scandals, but the ones who touched something deep inside Carson, a private list he never shared on air. The 9 guests were not only famous, but memorable. They made him laugh when no one else could, reminded him of why he chose this life, and even surprised him in ways that television history will never forget. Tonight, we're unpacking that list. From the comedy queen who stole Johnny's interviews, to the soul singer who turned bar gossip into magic, to the movie star who made Johnny Carson cry on live TV, these are the golden era icons Johnny truly loved. And once you understand why, you'll never see them the same again. When Lucille Ball stepped through the curtain, the whole room seemed to shake. Johnny's shoulders relaxed, his eyes lit up, and even the band seemed to sit up straight. She did not come as a guest, hoping to impress the host. She came like the storm everyone had been waiting for. Her laugh was unmistakable, loud, generous, and a little dangerous, because once Lucy started, plans would go up in smoke. Carson loved plans. He loved control. But with Lucy, he loved losing it. During commercial breaks, she turns the stage into a playground, pretending to balance on a wire, teasing the signal man, or miming a fall so hard that the crane operator almost drops his pole. The cameras may stop rolling, but Lucy doesn't. She believes in a simple rule. If there's a heartbeat in the room, there's a show. Johnny admired that. It reminded him of the early days, when laughter was more important than style. On air, she could move from a story about a disastrous rehearsal to an action scene so quickly that Johnny's next question would disappear on the tip of his tongue. He didn't mind. Watching Lucy was witnessing a kind of raw comedy that was rarely seen on television, dangerous enough to feel real, warm enough to feel safe. She had impeccable timing, but also instinct. If a joke needs space, she lets silence do the talking. If a moment calls for noise, she brings the thunder. What keeps her in Johnny's private circle isn't just her talent, it's her caring. After filming was over, Lucy lingered. She memorized the characters' names. She thanked the lighting crew for making the red-haired girl look so real. She told the stage manager that he ran a tighter company than any director she had ever had. She signed napkins for interns and encouraged a nervous researcher to try stand-up comedy just once. Johnny witnessed it all. He valued it more than he said. For Lucy, interviews were like jazz. Johnny would set a beat, and she would play until the walls shook. He didn't try to outsmart her. He just made peace. He smiled. He let the solo roll. As applause rippled through Studio One, he glanced at the audience with a boyish grin that said, "This is why I do this." Lucille Ball didn't just make Johnny laugh. She had set him free. And when she left the studio, her hair still tousled and playful, Carson would sit behind her desk, sigh with relief, and quietly enjoy that rarest of television sensations: unedited joy. When Bob Hope came to visit, Johnny didn't prepare questions. He just threw punches. He knew what was coming: a well-placed counter. One tag, then another, until the audience was laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. Hope's jokes sounded scripted, not scripted. He would wait a beat, tilt his head, and then deliver the line with the confidence of someone who had tested it in hundreds of rooms without ever getting it wrong. Carson liked that kind of economy. No wasted words, no digressions. Hope would sit down, cross-legged, and the two of them would spar like seasoned fighters, respecting the rules and knowing the shortcuts. Johnny would putt a clean tee shot. Politics, golf, Hollywood, then watch Hope hit the back wall. The secret isn't surprise, it's tact. Hope doesn't go for jokes. He drew them from a well he had been filling for decades. The rhythm was the show. Before the recording, the atmosphere was lighter. Hope likes to arrive early and swap golf stories that come to life when the cameras start rolling. Johnny appreciates being treated as an equal, not just a gateway to the audience. That's important to him. Many guests came to be noticed. Hope also appeared in the match. On television, the chemistry was established. Johnny would make a joke. How was the tour? And Hope would respond with a joke, then a story about airport food, then a quip about her own act. Johnny's eyes would flash with gratitude, mischievousness, as if to say, that's it. He doesn't have to get over it. He just has to get the ball on the next pitch. Hope's humor isn't cruel, nor is it weak. It was like pure steel. He could tease Johnny without hurting him, mock a senator without being bitter, and joke about fame without feigning distaste. That sharp yet warm balance suited Carson's sensibilities. He wanted laughter to be contagious, so the whole family could share it without anyone having to reach for the remote. Backstage, Hope learned everyone's name. He shook hands with the prop guy, waved to the crane operator, and told a quick joke to the stage manager as a tip. Johnny realized that old-school courtesy was a value he rarely spoke of but always considered. When the film ended, there was no emotion, just a nod from the two pilots as they landed the plane. As the band played, Johnny glanced at Hope with the kind of quiet admiration one reserves for someone who loves his work as much as he does. To Bob Hope, The Tonight Show felt exactly like Johnny wanted it to, a smart, generous prize fight where the only thing that mattered was the punchline. Jack Benny didn't need to be on stage. He flowed with it. No rush, no fanfare, just a slow, deliberate presence that made the room hold its breath with him. Carson sat up a little straighter when Benny appeared. The jokes will come, yes, but first there's the waiting. And for Benny, the waiting is the point. He uses silence as an instrument. A glance at the audience, a slight tilt of the head, a raised eyebrow that said everything and nothing at the same time. Johnny loved that control. He was an artist at timing, but Benny's rhythm ticked like a clock that you couldn't hear, only feel. A line that seemed ordinary in the hands of a bad guy became unforgettable because Benny stretched it so far that laughter had no choice but to ring out. On the sofa, Johnny would give him an easy finish, and then there would be silence. Benny took his time. He let the audience lean forward, let the band settle, let the cameras seem to hold their breath. When he finally answered, the relief was greater than the joke. Carson watched the mechanics like a student sitting in the back of a masterclass. He wasn't trying to add to the joke. He was studying the space around him. Behind the scenes, Benny remained precise. He would often ask a backstage attendant to lower his chair an inch, not for comfort, but for rhythm. He would read the monologue card and quietly suggest cutting a word out to make the rhythm clearer. He didn't talk about time as a theory. He adjusted the room until time became inevitable. Johnny respected that immensely. Lots of comedy stars. Few create the environment in which comedy must occur. Benny's personality, patient, polite, slightly arrogant, slightly stingy, acts as a scaffold. He can crack any joke because the audience is familiar with the music he is playing. When he stops, people fill in the blanks with what they expect him to think. The combination of performer and crowd is what makes Johnny so captivating. It's a belief built over years, expressed in a silent heartbeat. During commercials, he doesn't perform for attention. He keeps it. A nod to the cameraman, a small smile to the makeup artist, a soft, "How's it going tonight?" to the stage manager. He kept his energy in the tank so that the silence that followed would have weight. Johnny admitted, at least to his friends, that every time he slowed down or let out a laugh, he was taking his hat off to Benny. Not a parody. Respect. Because Jack Benny showed him something simple and rare. If you respect your audience, you will give them time. And if you master that moment, you'll own the laughter without having to raise your voice. As Ella Fitzgerald sang on The Tonight Show, the atmosphere in the room changed. The band got louder. The audience leaned forward, and Johnny's posture changed from host to listener. He didn't interrupt. He didn't talk nonsense. He just observed. Ella didn't come here to show off with magic tricks. She came here to tell the truth, plain and simple. Her entrance was very humble. No gimmickry, no wink to the camera, just a nod to the band, a fleeting smile at Johnny. And then the first sentence, round and natural, as if it had been waiting in the air for her to come. Carson liked the precision, and Ella's precision isn't mechanical, it's human. Every note tells a story. Every breath was intentional. When she scat-runned, the band responded like old friends speaking over each other. Johnny lived for that kind of work. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is worth it. Behind the scenes, the myth shrinks and the man grows. Ella thanks the monitor engineer for keeping the mix clean. She compliments the makeup artist on her attention to detail. She asks the stage manager about her week and seems sincere. No entourage blocked the hallways. No orders echoed across the floor. If a young intern approached with a program to sign, Ella would hold her pen in both hands as if the moment belonged to them, not hers. Johnny saw it all. In a business driven by ego, she turned humility into a superpower. On the sofa, she spoke softly. About the road. About the musicians who taught her to listen before she sang. About audiences who didn't need fireworks to be surprised. Johnny rarely pushes. He doesn't need to. The music speaks for itself. When the applause finally died down, he let out a sigh of relief, as if the show had just been reminded of what live television could be like when it wasn't trying so hard. What put Ella on Johnny's personal list wasn't just talent. It was the way her talent respected the room. She never overpowered the band or chased the applause. She created a space for the audience to come closer. And in that space, Johnny felt safe. No competition. No need to be smarter than the other. Just two professionals quietly honoring the same craft. When she left the stage, the silence wasn't empty. It was warm and gracious, like something genuine had happened that needed no explanation. Johnny would rearrange the cards, glance at the camera, and smile with a serenity that couldn't be faked. With Ella Fitzgerald, the show feels more like music than television. Structured, generous, and authentic. Dean Martin doesn't walk onto the Tonight Show set. He's hunkered down, tie loose, cocktail in hand, and a grin that spells trouble. Johnny knew what that smile meant. The plan was about to go up in smoke, and he liked it. Dean isn't as polished as Benny or as careful as Ella. He thrives on chaos. He'll often flop down in his chair, interrupt Johnny mid-song, or tease Ed McMahon until the audience laughs. Carson, who usually keeps to the format, suddenly loosened up. With Dean, the show didn't feel staged at all. It was like two friends swapping stories in a bar that happened to be watched by millions. What Johnny admired was Dean's ability to turn chaos into charm. A rambling guest could bore a crowd, but Dean's ramblings became the show. He'll stumble on a joke, pause, smirk, and somehow make it more interesting. The secret is confidence. Dean isn't afraid to be silly because he knows his charisma will move the room, and that ease carried Johnny along. Their banter was not rehearsed dialogue. It was jazz, unpredictable, adventurous, and alive. Backstage, Dean kept up the same energy. He winked at the camera crew, complimented the band leader, or raised an imaginary glass to the runway manager. Johnny appreciated the spirit. It wasn't arrogance. It was generosity laced with mischief. For Carson, Dean Martin was more than just a singer or a comedian. He's a reminder that television doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be fun. Every time Dean leaves the stage, Johnny leans back with the satisfied smile of someone who's just been reminded not to take himself too seriously. He would hug the stagehands, tease the band, and crack a quick joke to the makeup artist before stepping under the lights. When he arrived at Johnny's desk, the crew was buzzing. Carson once said Sammy could light up Burbank without a plug, and it wasn't just a joke. It was true. On air, Sammy never sat still. He danced on his chair, tapped out beats on his armrests, or got into character so seamlessly that his audience gasped. He could go from Sinatra singing, to Bogart growling, to Jerry Lewis grinning, all in 30 seconds, with Johnny sitting back grinning like a fan. Unlike some of the other guests who needed the host to lead the way, Sammy took it upon himself to lead the room and invite Johnny to surf. But behind the flashiness was respect. Sammy never treated the show as a stage to show off. He treated it like a party, and everyone, the audience, the crew, and Johnny, were honored guests. He listened, he responded, and he made room for others to shine. That generosity is what Carson treasured most. He admires artists who can make the whole room go crazy, not just themselves. Backstage, Sammy often leaves behind a roar of laughter. He'll teach a crew member a dance move, joke with an intern about their tie, or balance a hat on his nose just to break the tension before a difficult shoot. Johnny noticed the whole crew lit up when he was around. That was more important to him than ratings or applause. To Carson, Sammy Davis Jr. was the embodiment of what entertainment should be: lively, natural, and kind. Every time Sammy leaves the stage, Johnny doesn't just have a show, he has a memory. And in those moments, The Tonight Show isn't just a show, it's a celebration. Betty White never asked for a vacancy. She deserved it the moment she smiled. Jimmy Stewart didn't need a flashy introduction. He walked slowly, his shoulders slightly hunched, his deep, familiar voice softening the edges of the room. To Johnny Carson, who valued composure and quick wit, Stewart brought something rarer: sincerity. Not just because he was a movie star, but because he was genuine, down to earth, and very human in a world built on glamour. Johnny loved the way Stewart told stories. He doesn't rush. He starts with a tentative story and lets the audience figure it out. Whether it's about a small-town neighbor or a memory from the military, the story touches the heart. Johnny, usually sharp and ready to quip, sometimes fell silent, letting Stewart's voice carry the conversation. It wasn't his usual rhythm, but it felt right to Jimmy. The night Stewart read the poem about his dog Bo was one of the few times Carson let his guard down. His eyes welled up, his voice cracked, and for the first time, the normally in-control host looked vulnerable. Johnny later acknowledged that Stewart was the most sincere man to ever sit in that chair. It wasn't just respect, it was admiration. Behind the scenes, Stewart was no different. He greeted the crew with the same warmth he greeted the audience. He asked about their families, remembered their names, and acted with the humility of someone who had never forgotten his roots. Johnny appreciated that. He judged people not just by their talents, but by how they treated those who went unnoticed. Stewart passed that test with ease. What Carson loved most was that Stewart represented a solid, authentic America. With Stewart on board, Johnny wasn't a showrunner fighting for ratings. He was a Nebraska boy who was reminded of the importance of decency. Stewart didn't just charm the crowd. He brought steadiness to the show, and for Carson, that steadiness was invaluable. When she stepped onto Johnny's stage, the audience leaned forward as if they were in on a secret. Johnny, who valued quick wit and precise rhythm, sat up straight. He understood what Betty brought to the table: sharp wit, bold play, and warmth that never forced itself. From the first exchange, she matched him every step of the way. Johnny threw a tricky punch, Betty caught it, turned it around, and then responded with a line that had the audience laughing. The brilliance was not just in the joke, but in the confidence behind it. She wasn't trying to outdo Johnny. She met him where he was, dry and fast and a little dangerous, and pushed him to go one step further. Watching them together, it felt like two experts trading solos without ever stepping on each other's toes. Betty's humor was biting, but never hurtful. She could poke fun at Johnny's ego, poke fun at late-night boy clubs, or turn an innocuous anecdote into a playful power play, and do it with a smile that made everyone feel included. Johnny admired that control. Many guests swung hard and missed. Betty touched the ball lightly, placed it exactly where it needed to be, and then walked leisurely to number one as if nothing had happened. It was a calmness disguised as ease. Off camera, she's the one Johnny silently champions. When the scene ends, Betty doesn't sprint out the exit. She stays. She asks the stage manager how things are going, thanks the cameramen for their close-ups, and chats with the interns like old friends. If a makeup artist apologizes for disturbing her, Betty jokes that the mirror is the real diva. That kindness is not performance. It was a habit. Johnny valued it more than applause. The crew loved her because she cared about everyone. She remembered names. She remembered pets. When the sound technician mentioned a sick dog, she came back the next time to ask how it was. The memory made the room seem visible, and Johnny, who judged character by how others treated the invisible, never forgot it. On television, she gave him freedom. Johnny could risk a more outrageous label or a bolder taunt because he believed Betty would understand. That kind of confidence is rare on television, and even rarer when it's this gentle. When the band played and the applause finally died down, Johnny's smile said it all. If he could, he'd book her to act every week. With Betty White, the show wasn't just funny, it was also great. And with Johnny Carson, that was the highest score a guest could achieve. Now my first guest, someone who I can look at and kind of giggle at. As you know, he's an Emmy Award-winning artist. He'll be hosting a special show with you on Tuesday night, May 25th. George Burns didn't chase the limelight. He brought it with him. The way the man in the old overcoat, the cigar in his hand, the downcast, twinkling eyes said he'd seen every joke twice and still liked the third one best. When he stepped onto Johnny's stage, the energy didn't spike. It settled. The entire audience believed in him before he even spoke. So did Johnny. Burns practiced a kind of polite comedy. He was unhurried, unforced. He told jokes the way a host carefully sets out crystal glasses, with a pause, a smile, and an invitation to enjoy. He took a drag of his cigar, glanced at the audience as if sharing a secret, and then delivered a sentence so neatly you could hear the joke being delivered. Johnny loved that elegance. Lots of funny comics. Burns made humor civilized. Behind the scenes, the legend matched the man. He arrived early, greeted the security guard by name, and shook the prop master's hand as if they were fellow actors. He tapped a backstage crew member on the shoulder, whispered a brief line as a cue, and nodded repeatedly. That little courtesy was contagious. By the time he sat down, the whole group had grown a little taller. Johnny noticed. He always judged guests by the feel of the room when they left. Burns let the air warm up. On the sofa, Burns talked like a waltz. Johnny led gently, asking about the roads, the old routes, the transition from radio to TV, and Burns would tell stories that flowed smoothly, without forcing. He never competed with the host. He collaborated. If Johnny wanted a laugh, Burns would provide the humor, the twist, the gentle departure. If Johnny wanted heart, Burns would have lowered his voice and let memory guide him, especially when he spoke of the people who built him. He didn't sell myth. He respected it. Carson admired Burns's repertoire architecture. There were performances you saw and performances you didn't see. A rhythm of microbeats, looks, breaths, leans, lines, Afterthought tags taught the audience how to laugh on command without feeling told. It was this old-fashioned, invisible, steady craft that made television look like vaudeville in a better light. Johnny, who valued control, saw in Burns a blueprint for authority without fuss. When the show ended, the applause was less a relief and more a gratitude. Burns tapped his cigarette, smiled at the crew, and walked away, as if he were leaving a living room rather than a recording studio. Johnny packed up his notes more calmly than before, reminding himself that the best comedy isn't about shouting, it's about shaking your hand. For George Burns, The Tonight Show was about more than laughter. It was about class. When Sammy Davis Jr. came on The Tonight Show, it was like electricity ran through the building, not a guest walking onto the stage. Johnny's smile was wide before Sammy even sat down, because he knew what was coming. The energy, the rhythm, the joy that couldn't be contained by cameras or curtains. Sammy had a rare ability to bridge the gap between performance and friendship.